Scott, I mentioned it earlier. We did get a couple of fan questions. Let's get through these a little quick, and then I guess we can get out of here. The first one I see in the YouTube chat is from Greg L., and Greg has been listening to the show for quite some time. So, Greg, good to have you back. He asks, who do you see starting next to Atkins? Is it Billings? Is it the fourth-round pick Glasgow, Brandon Thompson, Sims, Williams? There's also Marcus Hardison, who he didn't ask about, but that's another guy in there. Interestingly enough, Scott, with this question, you look at Atkins, Billings, Glasgow, and Thompson and Sims, and then even Hardison. All of those guys are either third or fourth-round picks. And so the Bengals know what they're doing in terms of getting a defensive tackle that can produce at high levels, be it from the high end of the spectrum of Atkins to Sims and all these other guys. They know what they're doing when they get these middle-round defensive tackles. They grabbed another one in Ryan Glasgow out of Michigan this year. Billings, I think that was everybody's favorite pick of last year, just based on value and his game tape and everything. Unfortunately, he missed the entire year, so that leaves some question marks. Who do you see kind of having the inside track now that D'Amata Pico's gone? And these guys, there's a big scrum there. Is it a veteran, a Sims, Thompson, that sort of thing, or is it one of these young guys?
I'm going to say, I guess when I'm thinking of the guys starting next to Atkins, I'm thinking of that position they're looking for. And if Atkins is more of your three technique, at least my impression is someone like a Deshaun Williams or Marcus Hardison is probably more in that mold, more the penetrator, the guy that like Geno Atkins, whereas the guy who is more likely to replace Pecco is, your big guys lining up over the center inside the guard, that big beefy body that in theory you want taking hopefully a couple tackles, that immovable object kind of a player, that one that can kind of control the middle. And to me, that seems like that mold is either down to Billings, Thompson, Sims, or Glasgow most likely. And based on the Bengals' love of veterans, it would seem like Sims or Thompson would have the inside track. But I guess I'm going to be the optimistic person who looks at upside and say I really want it to be Billings, because I think we kind of got the impression last year the team really wanted to be Billings. It seemed like he was getting a lot of snaps in training camp, and there was a lot of talk from the Bengals staff, who usually don't talk up defensive rookies too much early in camp. They really seemed to be high on him, and you kind of got the impression they were a little devastated when he went down, because it seemed like they had a lot more expectations for him as far as playing time as the team would compared to what they would normally give a younger guy. So I'm gonna assume when it's all said and done, especially since he seems to be coming back fully healthy, I think it's going to be Andrew Billings and Atkins as the two starters. But I can't say I've ever I've never been wrong before. But if I were to guess, I would say, just based on how I think the defense wants to use them and the little pieces I'm trying to put together from what has kind of leaked out from Paul Brown Stadium, I'm going to guess it's Billings.
I tend to agree with you. I think they're a little leery. I haven't heard this specifically. I think they're probably a little leery in handing him the job, just because not only is he a young guy, but he missed the entire year last year. But I agree with you in terms of what they saw last year. Obviously, Billings, for those who don't know, was known as an absolute monster in the weight room in terms of bench press and, all kinds of the big workouts that you want to see a defensive lineman excel at. He did it, and he dominated at Baylor. There were times that they thought that he wasn't that great against the pass, but I think as a senior he had something like 5.5 sacks as a defensive tackle. So I don't know if that's a completely founded argument against him. I think, though some pundits had him going to the Bengals in the first round in last year's draft, I didn't think he was a first-round talent, but I definitely thought he was better than a fourth-round talent. So for me, I think if you're looking for the guy who's maybe first on the field that trots out with the rest of the starters, probably Billings if he stays healthy and looks like the same brute that he did in college and in the early parts of camp last year. But I think this is going to be a by committee thing, and that's why I think guys like Thompson and Sims might hang around. I've always been a big Pat Sims guy. I know he's not the most flashy player, but he has been a great fit for this team for so many years. He had one good season with the Raiders, one kind of down season. Then he's come back on these little rental deals, but stays out of trouble. He knows the system well. He's a great run stopper. I remember him having some good games against the Steelers in the past. So I think if you're looking at a guy who may come out for first down, maybe first 2 downs, that's the guy. Then maybe bring in a Sims. And it's kind of what they do at running back. Maybe there's different series where Sims is in there, Thompson's in there. Maybe they use the 2-3 technique guys to get to the passer. Maybe they kick in a defensive end on passing downs to get guys like Willis and Lawson off the edge. So I think they're going to get creative, but I think you're going to see Billings in there. I think you're going to see one of those veterans. I don't know that they keep both Sims and Thompson, but they might. I think one of those guys at least makes it and probably rotates in there frequently. And maybe as Billings begins to get his feet back under him, both in terms of recovery from injury and learning the pro game, I think then you'll kind of see him take over more snaps. But they do have a lot of talent there. They have a lot of talent defensive tackle, so it's a good problem to have. Unfortunately, they might just let some pretty good guys go based on the rest of how the rest of their roster is shaking up. And this next question is from Cliff 3JLL, and this is one we've talked about before, but this is the time of year, Scott, where the Bengals give out contract extensions, mostly to players. They usually do a lot of their star guys or pretty good players that they're maybe in the last year of their deal or something of that nature. They give out an extension just so they don't hit free agency, which is a good thing. And when we get frustrated about what they don't do in free agency, some of that money then goes to these extensions. So this isn't about a player, though, Scott. This is about Marvin Lewis. Does Marvin Lewis play out the 2017 season without a contract, or do you think he gets an extension before week 1? Now, maybe the draft and the players they've amassed there has something to do with it in terms of playing in his corner. Usually, even though the Bengals do contract extensions in the summer for players, usually when Lewis has done these little extensions, these 1-year, 2-year deals, at least as of recently, that's been more in the January, February months. And now here we are almost in June. Pretty interesting, and I don't know what to think. I think personally I'm inclined to think that they're going to let him play out as a lame duck coach, even though they don't want him to, just because of where we are right now. But what do you think?
I would have to say I totally agree with you. I think as much as the Bengals' track record seems to indicate they like to stick with mediocrity and they kind of defend their own and keep their own, there are some signs they've shown over the last year or two that make you think that, okay, maybe this team does finally get it. Maybe they feel that loyalty is good, but ultimately you need the best players and the best coaches and the best everything on the field. Yep. I mean, they finally got rid of Nugent and mid-season, which I think was highly unexpected. And you look at some of the other things they did. They finally let Brandon Tate go before the season, something we never thought would happen. They've seemed to be making some moves that seem to be common sense football moves, but moves that, based on their history, you just kind of surprise you to see the Bengals making. So that being said, I think they're finally getting that, yeah, this guy was better than what we had before him, but 15 years later, we're still looking for a playoff win. So I think that I'm assuming they're like thinking, okay, we're just going to let him play it out, see what happens. If we don't get any better, we don't get the playoff win, enough's enough, it's time to move on. Or they give him another one, sign him for one more year. Because I think at this point, it's not like some teams are lining up to take Lewis from us. So I don't think you need to lock him up if you're worried someone's going to grab him. And at that point, and I know Mike Brown's a huge loyalty guy based on how his dad was treated when he left Cleveland, how that all unfolded. And they tend to be loyal to a fault in that regard. But, 15 years is pretty loyal for someone that hasn't won you a playoff game yet. So I would be surprised, maybe somewhat disappointed if he got an extension before the season ended until he kind of shows something.
Yeah,
and by something, I mean,
yeah, and I think the key point of Cliff's question was before week 1, at least for me. It's not like I don't think the Bengals will re-sign Marvin Lewis after this. The thing is like you said, teams aren't necessarily lining up for him. Maybe if he is willing to take a coordinator position somewhere, if he ends up not re-signing with the Bengals, maybe then he'd be a very hot commodity. Maybe if he wants a front office position somewhere and whatever. But I think the week before week 1 is the key part of Cliff's question for me, where I don't think this summer we're going to see an extension for Marvin Lewis. We've seen crazier things happen, so I could be very wrong on this, but I don't think that's happening. But if somehow, week 10 rolls around, week 11, something like that, the Bengals are 7-3, the Bengals are 8-2. They're right in the midst of the playoff picture, maybe vying for another AFC North title. Then I think in season they would maybe get something done. Now I know the team doesn't like to do that. I know Marvin Lewis doesn't like to do that. They've said that publicly, that they like during the season to focus on football. But maybe it's kind of, hey, let's kind of see what we have on the field first this year. And maybe it's it's not quite a prove it year, but if you show us something significant and that last year was more of a blip on the radar and that you've built a consistent winner once again, maybe then it's an in-season contract extension that could happen. I just don't know if I see it coming before the season. Scott, did you have any additional thoughts on that?
On that note, but there were a couple more questions I was going to answer quickly if we had time.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. A couple that I saw in the YouTube chat. The first one was from Tyler Adlita, who I hope I got your name right. Question about Kevin Minter. Basically, who is he? And I'm just going to kind of sprint through these. Essentially, what we've gathered from Arizona Cardinals fans is he is a better Ray Maluga, is the best way to put it. They let him go because they were looking for speed. He wasn't as fast as the linebackers they have, so they kind of saw him as a weak link as far as speed goes. So that's why they let him go. As far as the Bengals go, he's definitely better than Ray Maluga. So that's why he is now in Cincinnati, and Maluga is not in Cincinnati. The other quick answer I wanted to give is for Shells Heavy, which is a question about Joe Mixon. By what week do you see Joe Mixon being named as Bengals starting running back? Personally, I think it's going to be week 1 of 2018.
Yeah.
Just don't see it happening this year. I think it's going to be Jeremy Hill. He's in a contract year. He's in his last year. I see the Bengals sticking with him at least, that first snap of every game. And when Bernard comes back, I think he is going to possibly be this. I think what's all said and done, Mixon could see the most touches this year of the running backs. I just don't see the team making him the starter. And I think it's somewhat just Marvin's nature. He is a rookie, and there is that thing. I think they want to try to show that, you do have all this baggage and all this stuff. We're not going to reward you because, with a starting role, we're going to make you, well, you're our best player, so we're not going to sit you the whole season, but we're not really going to, make you that starter per se. So that's two quick answers I wanted to give on a couple questions.
I did see those, and I just, time perspective, I omitted them, but I'm glad you got to them. And just real quickly on Mixon, there's two schools of thought, and this plays into the last question about Marvin Lewis's contract extension. If he doesn't get one and he is in that lame duck status, maybe he's more inclined to say, look, if this is the best guy, regardless of the issues, regardless of his own possible personal beliefs of we got to make him earn it, we got to make sure that this guy who has had trouble, we don't give him too much of a chance at stardom too fast. It could go to his head, whatever that looks like. Maybe because he does not have a contract, maybe he says, screw it, and he gets him on the field early. Our own Joe Goodberry, who has been on this program, has done some stuff for Cincy Jungle. I believe he threw out a tweet a few days ago that said he believes Mixon could be the number 3 guy in the Bengals offense in terms of receptions. So maybe that's where they start using him early on instead of more so as a true running back. They do have a guy like that in Gio Bernard, but he is coming off of a knee injury. So, I think they'll get creative in ways to use him. It's just a matter of how. I still think Jeremy Hill's going to be that short yardage, maybe goal line guy. Giovanni Bernard's probably going to do a lot of different things. And then Mixon will be in there. I don't want to say week 1 of next year he'll be the starter, but, I think you'll see him out there as the year wears on. He might go out with the first team. Again, kind of the thing we talked about with the defensive tackles, where even though he's the starter by game clock standards, I guess, he may not be, carrying the ball 25, 30 times, getting 40, 45 touches a game. Maybe it's more 15 to 20 touches a game, that sort of thing. But maybe it increases as the year goes on. Thanks for answering those, Scott. We're going to get out of here, and thank you all for your fan questions. We appreciate it. We love answering these. We love that you guys tune in every week live. Keep them coming. If you weren't able to join us live, you can send them on all the mediums I mentioned earlier, especially on Twitter at BengalsOBI and via email, theobinsider@gmail.com.